You think heartbreak comes when someone leaves you. But the truth is, sometimes heartbreak begins the exact moment someone walks into your life. And in my case, that someone was never supposed to be mine. It all started the day my roommate's girlfriend walked into our dorm room like she owned the place. Her name was Claire. And with just one smile, one glance, she rewrote every unspoken rule I had carefully built to keep myself safe. I wasn't the kind of girl who got caught up in drama. I liked my routines, my quiet nights with books, my endless cups of coffee in the tiny kitchen of our dorm at Columbia University. My roommate Jenna was the wild one, the kind of girl who turned every party into a headline story. And Claire? She was Jenna's latest headline, the kind of girlfriend who seemed untouchable, out of reach, wrapped in an aura of danger and sweetness that made my chest ache even before I understood why. The first time we met, Claire leaned against my desk, her blonde ponytail falling carelessly over her shoulder as she studied me like I was some puzzle she'd been waiting to solve. "So you're the famous roommate," she said, her voice dripping with curiosity. I wanted to laugh. Famous? I was anything but. I was the invisible one, the girl in the background of Jenna's chaotic life. But when Claire's blue eyes met mine, I felt seen, like really terrifyingly seen for the first time. And that's when the trouble began. Claire wasn't just beautiful. She was magnetic. The kind of girl who could make you forget what you were saying mid-sentence, the kind who left a trail of questions in her wake. She smelled faintly of vanilla and rain, and when she laughed, the sound cracked through my walls like sunlight through blinds. But she was Jenna's, my roommate's, my friend's. That fact should have been enough. It should have been the lock on the door of my heart. But instead, it became the very thing that made every glance, every word, every accidental brush of her hand against mine feel dangerous and forbidden. The more I tried to ignore it, the worse it got. One evening, Jenna had dragged Claire into our dorm after another wild night out. Jenna collapsed into her bed, leaving Claire perched on the edge, her jacket draped carelessly across my desk chair. I tried to keep my eyes on my laptop, but Claire leaned closer, lowering her voice like she wanted this to be our secret. "Do you always let her walk all over you?" she whispered. The question burned. Jenna was messy, loud, and sometimes reckless. But she was my roommate, my friend, the person I had promised myself I'd tolerate, no matter how chaotic things got. I opened my mouth to defend her, but when I looked at Claire, I saw something in her eyes, something sharp, something aching. "You don't know her like I do," I said softly. Claire tilted her head, studying me again with that unnerving focus. "Maybe I'd like to know you instead." My heart skipped. I laughed it off, told myself she was teasing, that I was imagining the way her gaze lingered. But later that night, lying in the dark, listening to Jenna's even breaths on the other side of the room, I couldn't shake the memory of Claire's words. And I hated myself for the way I replayed them over and over like a song I couldn't turn off. The weeks that followed were torture disguised as ordinary life. Claire was around, constantly helping Jenna with her art projects, crashing on our futon, leaving little traces of herself everywhere. A half-empty bottle of perfume on the windowsill, a hair tie on the kitchen counter, her laugh echoing down the hall. Every trace of her was a reminder of the boundary I wasn't supposed to cross. And yet, every time Jenna turned her back, Claire found a way to push me closer to the edge. She'd sit next to me during study sessions, her knee brushing mine just enough to send sparks up my spine. She'd steal sips of my coffee, wrinkling her nose when it was too bitter, then smile like she was sharing a private joke with me. The worst part was the way she listened. Really listened. When I talked about my dreams of becoming a writer, about the loneliness I carried like a secret, she leaned in like every word mattered. Jenna never did that. One night, Claire and I ended up alone in the dorm after Jenna left for a weekend trip. We sat on the floor surrounded by pizza boxes and cheap wine, the fairy lights above us casting soft shadows on the walls. "I don't think I've ever felt at home anywhere," Claire admitted, her voice low, raw. "But with you, I don't know. It feels different." I should have stopped her. I should have changed the subject. But instead I whispered, "I know exactly what you mean." The silence that followed was heavy, charged. And when Claire's hand found mine warm and trembling, I didn't pull away. I couldn't. For the first time in my life, I felt like I was exactly where I was meant to be. But reality is cruel. The moment Jenna came back, it all shattered. Claire slipped effortlessly into her role as the perfect girlfriend, laughing too loudly at Jenna's jokes, kissing her in the doorway as if nothing had ever happened between us. And I stood there, invisible again, my heart splintering with every fake smile. I told myself it was just a mistake, a one-time weakness. I told myself to bury it, to forget. But Claire didn't let me. She kept looking at me like that night meant something. Like we had crossed an invisible line and neither of us could go back. And I realized with a sick twist of fear that I didn't want to go back. That was the beginning of the end. The story of how I fell for my roommate's girlfriend isn't one I'm proud of. It's messy, it's painful, it's wrong in all the ways that matter. But it's also the truest thing I've ever lived. Because sometimes the heart doesn't care about rules. Sometimes the heart wants what it shouldn't. And sometimes that obsession, the sweet, terrible obsession, is the only thing that makes you feel alive. The problem with secrets is that they don't stay small. They grow, stretching into the corners of your life until they suffocate you. And with Claire, my secret wasn't just growing, it was devouring me alive. Every glance, every whispered word, every accidental touch felt like fire under my skin. And every time I looked at Jenna, guilt stabbed me so deep I almost convinced myself to walk away. Almost. But then Claire would smile at me when Jenna wasn't looking, that half smile full of danger and promise, and I'd fall all over again. It was a Thursday afternoon when things really started to spiral. Jenna had dragged me to an art show in Brooklyn, one of those edgy galleries filled with abstract canvases and pretentious wine. Claire, of course, was by her side, her arm looped casually through Jenna's, but her eyes, they were on me. Always on me. I tried to ignore it, to focus on the art, but the way Claire's gaze burned into me made every painting blur into meaningless swirls of color. "You look like you're suffocating," Claire murmured when Jenna disappeared to the bathroom. I shot her a glare. "Stop." She leaned closer, her perfume curling around me like smoke. "Stop what?" "You know what," I whispered, my voice sharp, but my body traitorous as it leaned toward her. Claire's lips curved into a dangerous smile. "I can't stop looking at you." I opened my mouth to argue, but Jenna returned, clutching a plastic cup of cheap wine, oblivious to the silent war happening inches away from her. And that was when it hit me, we weren't just playing with fire. We were building a forest fire, and it was only a matter of time before everything burned. The guilt ate at me in the quiet moments. When Jenna fell asleep on her bed, her head buried under a pile of blankets, I would lie awake, replaying every choice, every stolen second. She trusted me. She confided in me about her insecurities, about how much she loved Claire, about how scared she was of losing her. And I would nod, smile, promise her it was fine, all while my heart betrayed her in the dark. One night, Jenna confessed, "I think Claire's the one, you know? She's different. She makes me feel safe." Safe. The word lodged in my throat like glass. Because if Jenna only knew the truth, that Claire's lips had been inches from mine, that her hand had lingered on my wrist like a police safe, would be the last thing she'd feel. I wanted to tell her, to rip off the bandage and face the wreckage. But then I'd see the way Claire touched her, the way Jenna's face lit up with a kind of fragile hope, and I couldn't do it. So I stayed silent. And silence, I learned, is its own kind of betrayal. The breaking point came on a rainy Friday night. Jenna had gone out with her art classmates, leaving me and Claire alone in the dorm. I told myself I'd stay in my room, lock the door, avoid temptation. But temptation has a way of knocking anyway. Literally. There was a soft tap on my door. When I opened it, Claire stood there, damp from the rain, her blonde hair sticking to her cheeks, her denim jacket soaked through. "Can I come in?" she asked softly. I should have said no. I should have slammed the door. But instead I stepped aside, my chest tight with anticipation and dread. Claire moved into the room, her presence filling it in a way that made everything else shrink. She dropped her jacket on my chair and sat on the edge of my bed, looking small and vulnerable in a way I had never seen before. "I can't keep pretending," she whispered, her voice breaking. My heart thundered. "Claire." She shook her head, tears welling in her eyes. "I know it's wrong. I know she's your roommate. But every time I'm with her I feel like I'm lying. And every time I'm near you I feel alive." Her confession cracked something open in me. The dam I had been building for weeks crumbled, and suddenly I was drowning in everything I had tried to deny. I crossed the room before I could stop myself, my knees brushing hers as I sat down. You can't say things like that, I whispered, my voice trembling. But it's the truth, Claire said, her hand finding mine. Her fingers were cold from the rain, but her grip was desperate, burning. And I think you feel it too. Silence stretched between us, heavy and electric. And then before I could think, before I could stop myself, I leaned in. Our lips met, soft at first, then fierce, hungry, as weeks of suppressed longing ignited into something neither of us could control. It was reckless. It was cruel. It was the most beautiful thing I had ever felt. When we finally pulled apart, breathless and trembling, reality crashed back in. What are we doing? I whispered, my chest aching with guilt and desire all tangled together. Claire pressed her forehead to mine. Something we can't undo. And she was right. The days that followed were a blur of stolen moments. A brush of her hand against mine when Jenna wasn't looking. A secret smile across the room. Quick, heated kisses stolen in the shadows when Jenna left us alone. Every second was a rush, intoxicating and terrifying. And every second the guilt grew heavier, the weight of what we were doing pressing harder on my chest. Jenna began to notice. One night, as we sat in the dorm eating takeout, she looked at me with narrowed eyes. You've been weird lately, she said, her tone suspicious. Like, distant. Is everything okay? I froze, chopsticks halfway to my mouth. Claire glanced at me, her expression unreadable, before turning back to Jenna with a casual laugh. She's probably just stressed with classes, Claire said smoothly. Jenna seemed to buy it, but her gaze lingered on me, searching. And for the first time I realized how fragile this all was. We weren't just risking a heartbreak. We were risking everything: friendship, trust, love. And yet, even with that knowledge burning in me, I couldn't stop. The climax came faster than I expected. It was another night of rain, the kind of storm that rattled the windows and soaked the city in silver. Jenna had gone to the library to work on a group project, leaving me and Claire alone again. We didn't even pretend to resist this time. We kissed, desperate and unrestrained, hands tangled in each other's hair, bodies pressed together like we could merge into one. It was messy, it was wrong, but it was real in a way nothing else in my life had ever been. And then the door opened. Hey, Jenna's voice froze mid-sentence. She stood there in the doorway, eyes wide, face pale, her umbrella dripping onto the carpet. Claire and I broke apart, but it was too late. The truth was out, ugly and raw, splattered across the room like blood. The silence that followed was louder than any scream. Jenna's face crumbled. How could you? She whispered, her voice breaking. I opened my mouth, but no words came. There were no excuses, no justification strong enough to undo what she had just seen. Claire reached for her, but Jenna stepped back, tears streaming down her cheeks. Don't touch me. And then she was gone, the door slamming shut behind her, leaving us in the wreckage of what we had done. That night I realized something devastating. Obsession isn't sweet. It's poison. And now it was killing us all. The silence after Jenna left was worse than any scream. Claire sat on my bed, her hands trembling, her lips swollen from our kiss. I could still taste her, still feel her heat pressed against me, but all of it turned sour, poisoned by the look on Jenna's face. I had never seen betrayal look that raw before. She'll never forgive us, I whispered, my throat tight. Claire buried her face in her hands. I didn't mean for it to happen like this. Didn't mean for it to happen? I snapped, my voice rising despite the tears threatening to spill. Claire, we've been lying to her for weeks. We chose this. She looked up, her blue eyes shining with panic and something softer: love, maybe, or desperation. I chose you. The words cut straight through me. Part of me wanted to clutch them, to hold them close like a lifeline. But another part of part that still saw Jenna's broken expression felt sick. You chose me, I repeated bitterly, at the cost of everything else. That night, Jenna didn't come back to the dorm. Her bed stayed cold and empty, her blanket thrown messily across the sheets, like the ghost of her had been ripped out of the room. I lay awake listening to the rain, my chest heavy, my stomach twisted in knots. Claire stayed, but we didn't touch. We didn't even speak. She sat curled up on the other side of the room, staring at her phone like she could will a message from Jenna to appear. Never did. The next morning I found Jenna in the cafeteria. She was sitting with two of her classmates, but the moment she saw me, her face hardened. She stood, tray untouched, and walked out without a word. The rejection sliced me open. I wanted to chase her, to beg for forgiveness, to explain, but what explanation was there? That I had been lonely? That I had been swept up in something I couldn't control? None of it would undo the image burned into her memory. I had kissed her girlfriend. And worse, I had wanted it. Claire tried to talk to her, but Jenna wouldn't listen. Days passed in a blur of tension. Our dorm became a war zone. Jenna silent and sharp, Claire restless and guilty, me trapped between them like a prisoner waiting for a sentence. I caught fragments of Jenna's anger in the way she slammed doors, the way she refused to look at either of us. Once, late at night, I heard her crying in the bathroom, her sobs muffled but unmistakable. I pressed my hand to my pillow, forcing myself not to go to her. I had lost that right. The breaking point came a week later. We were all in the dorm, the air so heavy with unspoken words it felt hard to breathe. Jenna finally snapped, slamming her textbook shut. "Do you two think I'm stupid?" she demanded, her voice shaking with rage. "Do you think I don't see the way you look at each other?" Neither of us spoke. Her eyes filled with tears, her voice cracking. "You were supposed to be my best friend," she said to me. Then, turning to Claire, "And you were supposed to love me." Claire's face crumpled. "I did," she whispered. "I still know." Jenna's voice was sharp, final. "Whatever this is, it's not love. It's selfish. It's betrayal." Her words hit like stones. Because she was right. There was no way to dress it up, no way to soften it. What we had done was betrayal, no matter how desperately I wanted to believe it was love. Jenna shoved her things into a bag and left that night. I never saw her move out, but when I woke up the next morning, her side of the room was empty. Life without Jenna was quieter but not easier. Claire and I drifted in the wreckage, clinging to each other like survivors of a shipwreck. But even as I held her, I felt the weight of what we had done pressing down on us. Every kiss tasted like guilt. Every touch was haunted by Jenna's absence. "This doesn't feel right," I admitted one night, pulling away from Claire's embrace. She looked at me like I had just stabbed her. "You're saying we made a mistake?" "I'm saying we destroyed her," I whispered. "And I don't know how to live with that." Claire's eyes filled with tears. "But what about us?" The word us hung in the air, fragile and broken. I wanted to say it was worth it, that love made the destruction bearable. But I couldn't. Not when every corner of the dorm screamed Jenna's name. So I stayed silent. Weeks turned into months. Claire and I tried to keep our relationship alive, but it was built on cracks too deep to ignore. We fought constantly about Jenna, about guilt, about whether what we had was real, or just the product of loneliness and stolen desire. Sometimes I'd catch Claire staring at her phone, scrolling through old pictures of her and Jenna. Sometimes I'd find myself writing messages to Jenna I never had the courage to send. "I love you. I'm sorry. Please forgive me." Delete. 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 Our love, if that's what it was, became a prison. Sweet, yes. Obsessive, absolutely. But suffocating. Until finally one night, Claire packed her bag. "I can't do this anymore," she said, her voice shaking. "I love you, but every time I look at you I see her. And I can't keep living like this." My chest ached, but I didn't stop her. Because I felt the same. So she left. And just like that, I lost them both. The months that followed were empty. I threw myself into classes, into writing, into anything that could distract me from the hollow ache in my chest. I told myself I deserved the loneliness, that it was my punishment for the choices I had made. But late at night, lying in the silence of my single dorm room, I thought about Claire. About her laugh, her smile, the way her hand fit perfectly into mine. And I thought about Jenna. About the friendship I had shattered, the trust one had betrayed. Two girls. Two kinds of love. Both gone. And I was left with nothing but the ghost of what could have been. But here's the cruel thing about obsession. It doesn't fade. It lingers. And sometimes it brings you right back to where you began. Time is supposed to heal everything. That's what people say. But I learned that time doesn't erase obsession, it only buries it, letting it grow roots deeper into your chest until you almost forget it's there. Almost. By the time summer came around, I thought I was finally learning how to live without Claire. Without Jenna. Without the mess I had created. My days were filled with classes, long walks through Central Park, afternoons writing in coffee shops. I forced myself to laugh with new friends, to pretend that my heart wasn't still haunted. But every so often, when the light hit the trees just right or when a certain song played through the cafe speakers, I felt her again. Claire. Her laugh. Her touch. Her blue eyes burning into mine like I was the only person in the world. And every time I hated myself for still wanting her. It happened on a Wednesday in July. I had gone to a bookstore downtown, one of those cramped, cozy places that smelled like dust and dreams. I was flipping through a poetry collection when I heard a voice behind me. I didn't think you liked Neruda. My heart stopped. I turned and there she was. Claire. Her hair was shorter now, cut into a messy bob that framed her face. She wore a simple white blouse, jeans, and that same reckless smile that had undone me a year ago. For a moment the world tilted. I couldn't breathe. Couldn't move. She looked just as shocked. Her lips parted like she had 1,000 things to say but didn't know where to start. "Hi," she whispered. It was such a small word. And yet it cracked me wide open. We ended up in the little cafe next door, sitting across from each other with coffee cups between us like fragile shields. "I didn't think I'd ever see you again," I admitted, my voice low. Claire smiled sadly. "I tried not to. But New York's not that big." Silence stretched, filled with all the unsaid words hanging heavy in the air. Finally Claire spoke. "How have you been?" It was such a simple question. But how do you answer that to the person who broke you? To the person you broke with? "I survived," I said finally. "You?" Her blue eyes softened. "Same." We talked, awkward at first, then easier, like slipping into an old rhythm we had both tried to forget. She told me she'd dropped out of art school, that she was working at a gallery downtown. I told her I was writing more than ever, that I was finally working on a novel. We didn't talk about Jenna. Not at first. But eventually, the silence around her became unbearable. "Have you?" I hesitated. "Have you seen her?" Claire looked down at her coffee, her voice quiet. "No. Not since that night." The memory hit us both like a wave. The rain. The kiss. Jenna's face in the doorway. I swallowed hard. "I still think about it." "About her?" Claire nodded. "Me too." She paused, then added, "I hate what we did. But I don't regret feeling what I felt for you." My chest tightened. Even if it destroyed everything? Her eyes met mine, raw and unflinching. Especially because of that. We left the cafe together, walking side by side down the bustling city streets. The summer air was warm, the sidewalks crowded, but it felt like we were in our own world again. And then without thinking, I reached for her hand. She hesitated. Then slowly she laced her fingers through mine. Felt the same. Felt like home. Over the weeks that followed, we found each other again. It wasn't the wild, reckless fire it had been before. This time it was softer, quieter. A kind of love built not on secrecy but on choice. We spent afternoons wandering museums, evenings cooking cheap pasta in my tiny apartment. She'd sit on my couch, flipping through my notebooks, teasing me about my messy handwriting. I'd steal glances at her when she wasn't looking, memorizing the way the light hit her hair, the way her laughter filled the room. It wasn't perfect. The guilt was still there, like a scar we both carried. Sometimes we'd fall into silence, both of us thinking about Jenna, wondering where she was, if she was okay, if she hated us as much as we feared. But little by little, we learned to forgive ourselves. And in that forgiveness, we found each other again. The turning point came one night in late August. We were lying on the roof of my building. The city sprawled out around us in glittering lights. Claire turned to me, her expression serious. "I don't want to run anymore," she said softly. "I don't want to pretend or hide or live in the shadow of what we did. I want to love you. If you'll let me." My throat tightened. For so long I had convinced myself that what we had was poison, obsession, ruin. But in that moment, looking at her under the New York sky, I realized something I had been too scared to admit. She wasn't my ruin. She was my redemption. I reached for her hand, squeezing it tight. "Then let's stop running." And for the first time I felt free. We never saw Jenna again. Maybe that's for the best. Maybe some stories aren't meant to be rewritten, only carried as lessons. I'll never stop regretting the pain we caused her. I'll never stop wishing I could take it back. But life isn't about undoing the past. It's about learning to live with it, to grow from it. And with Claire by my side, I finally believed I could. Love is messy. It's painful. It's selfish and terrifying and often unfair. But it's also the thing that makes us human. Claire was my roommate's girlfriend. She was the mistake I should never have made. She was the obsession that nearly destroyed me. But she was also the love I couldn't forget. The love I didn't want to forget. And in the end, that love, our love, was worth everything. Thank you for listening. If you find it interesting, please like and subscribe to follow the next stories.